Well, joining us on the Coach's Corner is one of the longest serving head coaches in the King Center and the longest serving head coach in Emory Henry baseball history, Trey McCall. Trey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Brent.
Well, Trey, I think we have to start off with the obvious thing, which is that we ended the season in unheard of fashion with the cancellation of the season. Can you just kind of walk me through that process from your perspective?
Uh, we were actually playing at Brevard on the Wednesday, and that's sort of where I guess when we got back on the bus to come home, the email had gone out, on campus, and that was our first take. And then by Thursday, you're worrying about the weekend. We were supposed to play Randolph-Macon at home. Then you started getting the feeling that some schools were not going to play, other schools were going to continue to play. And, of course, that was just chaos right there. And then, within 12 o'clock Friday to 3 o'clock that afternoon, we were shut down. And, from that perspective, I'm not saying there was any good way to do it, but that may have been the best thing that happened versus, just sort of everybody doing their own thing and some teams getting to play, other teams not. Even within our department, I think other teams were traveling to other places where they weren't going to do anything. But once the men's basketball tournament and women's basketball tournament shut down, it was just a ripple effect. And wasn't anything good about it. It was a shock. It was a punch to the nose. And I think some days I feel like we haven't even got our eyes straight yet, just from that day.
How do you bring closure to that season, Trey? I mean, is there a way to even do that?
Well, I just believe there's a lot of things that happen to us in life that come out of nowhere. And I'm not trying to make this a cliche or to make this try to minimize what has happened. But, all of us go through things in life. This time we're all in the same boat for once. And, just when things happen, I think as time marches on, it's not that you get closure or even that you get understanding. It's just you begin to adapt, you begin to learn. I think despite everything you see on the news sometimes and all that's going on is the human being's pretty remarkable. And, I have faith in humanity that we're going to get through this, and faith in the good Lord that he's going to take care of us. But other than that, Brent, I mean, there's no textbook answer or textbook way to deal with this. I just think the human person, we all have some type of fight in us. We all have some type of resiliency. And what makes this different, I think, is that we're all in it together. So we may disagree on things at times, but, I'm not better off than anybody else. I mean, we're all just sort of going through this. And for colleges, it's, I think for all of us, missing out on spring, I would hope that we've all taken some time to realize what's important in life, even though we get so wrapped up in what we do and believe what we do is the most important thing on earth.
Absolutely. I think all of us would take maybe our worst day back at the college right now just to get back on campus at this point.
Right.
Trey, I was reading over the bio and the Trey McCall story is one that I know fairly well. I live basically a Trey McCall home run from the Abingdon baseball field here. But one thing I'll be honest with you that I didn't know is that this is technically your second stint as a head coach at Emory Henry. I've got to ask you about that 1991 season, because being a head baseball coach while you're getting your undergraduate degree, that doesn't happen much.
It doesn't, and it shouldn't. Let me just say that. I knew baseball. After I got released from the Phillies, and of course I swore I'd never go to Emory. Too small, too close to home, too everything. And I went to Emory in the off season because the old trimester met my schedule really well. And, for everything I thought Emory wasn't, it really was. Loved it. Once I got released, I had few weeks. I got released in July. And so I knew I'd be going back to school, and got back in school at Emory. And during my time there, even as I was playing baseball, a lot of people became friends of mine, and a fellow by the name of Chris Musser, who was a darn good friend of mine, really good friend of Emory and Henry baseball right now too. But Chris had gotten the baseball job. He was coaching football too. And he asked me if I'd help him in 1990. And so I did. And I really, of course, I love being around Muss. And, I was around baseball again, and, I enjoyed it. And then the next year, they had another football coach who was going to coach baseball, and he sort of left unexpectedly. And Coach Wacker, I remember he called me, and I went and talked to him, and asked me if I'd do it. And I said, I guess, yeah. I mean, what this coaching stuff, it can't be that hard. But the worst part about the whole situation is I'm coaching with people who 99% of them I considered my friends. And as I got back into coaching later, for real, I realized that there has to be a line between any coach and their players. I think you got to treat them with as much respect as anything, but there has to be that line, sort of like your parents. Your parents are your parents; they love you, but when it comes time to tell you you're wrong or you need to do this, your parents do that. And so it was interesting. It's just I was in the right place at the right time more than anything, and Emory needed a coach, and I was right there on campus, but I would not recommend it.
Well, 15 years later, you come back and you do it again. Talk about the second stint with Emory and Henry, and now you come back and you're an alum of the college, of course. And I'm just wondering how different it felt when you came back, and coming to always back to your alma mater. We feel this pressure when we're an alum of the college and we work there, and I'm sure you felt it too. How much did it help that you had kind of done that before at Abingdon High School, and then you make the jump to college?
Well, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about. There is an added level. I don't know what you call it or what it is, but anytime you work somewhere where you went to school, it doesn't mean you'll do a better job there than anywhere else, but you just always have that feel of maybe it's like some type of responsibility more than just a job, because we wouldn't do it if we didn't have a good experience in the first place. So, as far as coaching, I coach because of people who coach me. And when you come back and you start at Emory, it's just you want to make people proud, and that's just a chip you're always going to carry on your shoulder. It doesn't make your job harder, I don't think. It's just something that I think you might go an extra step, you might dig a little deeper, things like that. But I just enjoyed my time at Emory, and to have the opportunity to coach and work here now, it was just something really nice.
I want to ask you also about your coaching staff, and specifically, I want to ask you about Coach Cusco. He was your high school coach at Abingdon. What's it like having him now on your current coaching staff?
He's great, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that he came to Abingdon my freshman year in January because the baseball job came open, odd time, but and through connections he had where he had worked for people. We tell our guys, don't ever burn a bridge. You just don't know what will happen. He'd actually worked at the town pool in Abingdon as a college student. The person who ran it was Jerry Bishop. Well, in that January of 1981, years later, Jerry Bishop's the principal of Abingdon High School, and he was in a pickle, and he called John Cusco, and Coach Cusco got the job. That fall of my freshman year in high school, my mom had passed away, and so I tell you, at that time in my life, and we all go through rough times. It's amazing what people do for you. And then he came into my life my freshman year. He actually gave me and two other guys a shot, on the varsity. We didn't have a JV or anything. And, he always made the game fun, but he was a stickler for fundamentals. And he rarely, he got on us, but he didn't go into any tirades. I may have saw a couple. But, there's just a time in your life where people make a difference. And he was a huge difference maker in my life. I could have gone a lot of ways, blamed it on bad things happening, and so I'd seen him from time to time after I'd taken the Emory job. And of course, he was still coaching at UVA-Wise. And I kept telling him, well, when you retire, you got a place. And finally he retired, and it just all came together. So I'm not reliving my high school days, but the man has a lot to offer young people, and he's done it for a long time. And for him to work with us as a volunteer type position is just a gold mine for me. And I do. Him along with Chip, who's got as much experience as anybody. I can talk to him about things that sometimes you just don't have a clear answer to. But he's entertaining. The guys love him. He loves working on the field, so that frees me up some. And, he's got more energy than most young people to be retired.
Yeah, there's been times with John where I felt like, I had heard that he had, been getting some work done on medically or whatever. And then you feel like the next day he's back on campus and already out there on that field.
Yeah, I posted a picture last summer on Twitter. I think he was 2 weeks out of knee replacement, and he was push mowing his yard.
Well, Trey, this is Coach's Corner, but I've got to ask you a dad question. So both your daughters, Kat and Elizabeth, chose to go to Emory and Henry. What's that moment like for you as a dad?
Well, the biggest thing you want as a parent is for them to have their own life. For Laura and I, who are both Emory graduates, there is something weird about Emory. You see it. It's almost like the mafia. You can't get out. To see your kids go there and just sort of, I don't know how to put it the other way. Then it's not that you feel proud. You just know that they made a good decision. And it was their decision. So it's nice seeing them. I try to stay out of their life as much as possible. And, it hasn't been a problem at all, but I know they both are, they've got a great education. They've been around some great people, and I think they'll feel the same way that Laura and I do about Emory today.
Well, they've both carved out places. As someone that gets around campus, I see the leadership that they're doing. So they have definitely carved their own path. So you should definitely be proud of that, Trey.
We are.
I want to return to coaching for a second. Baseball is one of those sports that when I played it drove me nuts because I'm a perfectionist. And in baseball, you fail more than you succeed. And when I fail, I start losing love for things. But you're a person I know that just loves baseball. Why do you love baseball so much?
Growing up, I played everything like everybody else. I can still go back to the summers on a street I grew up with, guys I grew up with, the wiffle ball games. We would invade the town tennis courts, so we'd have a fence to hit it over until somebody showed up and ran us off. I don't know. I enjoyed all the sports, but that was just the one sport that I gravitated to. And it wasn't that it was always easy or anything like that. It was just, I don't know, it's sort of a combination of the physical. There's a lot of mental to it. And I think with baseball, you have time to digest what's going on, even though things will happen real quickly. Whether it's the smell of hot dogs or, people keeping scorecards. I don't know. It's just, or the baseball cards I used to collect as a kid. There's just something different with it. And of course I was blessed to be able to play it. And, I don't know. I don't know if I could ever find an answer. It's just like it, as I grew up, I did it. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. And no matter, like you said, no matter how bad the day, you know, I'm always ready to go back the next day. So I think that's a blessing.
Yeah, Trey, I have to be honest with you. I think of you as kind of one of those stalwarts of the King Center, as someone that's been around Emory for a little while now. You know, you're one of those people that I look up to, and you know, whenever you talk, I try to listen. And in your time around Emory, you've been around some of those legendary names of the college. And I guess I have to ask you, what are some of the things that you've kind of picked up and really learned from some of those folks that are the legendary names that are involved with Emory Henry Athletics?
Well, you know, just from working there, uh, my office was always on the way to the fitness center. So Coach Wacker would sometimes just come in and sit down. Um, you know, he was such an accomplished football player and coach. Um, but I will say this about him, no matter, and I think he may have been one of the most competitive people in the world, but you talking about a genuine human being, very humble. He, you know, for all his success, he could laugh at himself. You know, he took a lot of pride in what he did. And just to visit with him, I'd ask him questions, tell me stories. You know, he was just a genuine human being. And then, of course, he was passed away by the time I went to school there, but Coach Self, being around him while I was in college, that man would do anything for anybody. And so when you think of Fred Self, I think, and I know Emory makes a big deal of service and things like that. He is the Hercules of service, and things he did for people, whether they were part of the Emory community or not. You know, he just, I hope I could just, you know, do a tenth of what he has done. So with Fred Self, it was just this guy who would do anything for anybody. Coach Johnson, I think Coach Johnson was the type of person that he could rub you the wrong way at times, and usually it turned out good for you. I don't know how to frame that. He got his players, and I think people around him, to do things they probably normally would not do or put themselves into. And then, you know, thinking about Joy retiring, you know, just the consistency. I mean, she was just consistent in what she did. And sometimes I think what you learn from her is that, you know, even though she stepped down as women's basketball coach, it wasn't like you see a lot of people that when they step down, they get away from there. They don't want to be around those people anymore or something like that. You know, she flew right into teaching full time, and it's like she never, you know, like she never left or anything. She's still the same person. So when you see someone like her, you see a character that's true, you know, that uh, just transcends whatever you're going through. And, you know, even back then, you think of Coach Hutton. Uh, she, she was very determined. And I think all the ladies at Emory and Henry College now, as far as women's athletics, if they could hear the story of what she probably put up with, what she went through to get the program started and sustained, it'd be a good history lesson for all the young ladies. And then, of course, Doc Hudson was legendary. I mean, uh, to be where she was at in the profession and then come to Emory, you know, and then start the athletic training. So being there in the 80s and I know into the 90s while they were all sort of still doing the thing and up until really Coach Self died. And you talking about a staff. That was a staff. And not to be forgotten. You know, my biggest, I guess, enjoyment ever being in the King Center was Dave Thomas. You know, the man had a black vacuum cleaner with a number 3 on it for Earnhardt. And he lived life like Earnhardt raced. If you got in his way, he just knocked you out of the way. My favorite Dave story is we had to practice baseball early one morning because of the weather at 6 a.m., and that's when I was the head coach as a student. And I thought I got there about 5 a.m., wanted to make sure everything's right. And Dave is out in the lobby of the King Center. They'd played basketball the night before. And they used to run a little concession stand like they do now in front of the trophy case. And they used the big 2-liter jugs of drinks and stuff. And I guess some had spilled along with the popcorn and all that. And Dave is down on the brick with a wire brush, scrubbing out the stains. To be at Emory during that time with those people, and if it didn't change you, it's something wrong with you, I think all people who coach, or no matter what you do, there's people that you look to for guidance. It's scary who may be watching, but to be a student or an athlete at Emory during that period was remarkable, because you had some really class acts who were in the athletic department and were successful, and they did it the right way.
Yeah, I feel lucky that when I was there in the late 90s that I still got to know some of those folks, and always wondered why Coach Johnson loved me, but he did. And got to meet.
I got one good one for him. So we were on the trimester at that time, and I took the coaching and officiating basketball class. And it started after Thanksgiving, and the term would end at the end of February before spring break. Well, right after Christmas break, my friends and family, we went on a duck hunting trip to the Mississippi River in West Tennessee. And I told him before that I would miss the first day back of class. And he just looked at me and he said, "You know what that means?" And of course he said, "If you miss class ever, you got a B." And so I thought I was being responsible and telling him, and I got a B. So I learned if you're going to say something, you better mean it. And he held everybody accountable just the same as, it didn't matter.
I had my favorite story about myself with Fred Self is one of the first times I walked into the King Center gymnasium. Just like today, I wore boots all the time, and I wore some boots in there. And I think Fred had a few questions on what I was thinking about when I was wearing my muddy boots into the gymnasium. So, Trey,
I can tell you, even when I started working there and Coach Johnson was still there, he would just shake his head some days when something would go wrong. He said Fred could fix anything. He knew everything about the King Center, and he could fix it.
Trey, I think you would agree. I mean, I think, a college is lucky to have one Mount Rushmore of coaches and influences in their athletic world. I think we'd have to build a few mountains for the folks.
Very fortunate.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us, Trey. Really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your time.
All right. God bless everybody.